Blog Talk Radio.
Hi, folks. Welcome. I'm Dan McDermott. This is the McDermott Report. We're live every night, every weeknight at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We talk about news and tech and whatever's going on that day. I have two guests tonight. First guest is Bret Hrbek. Bret, welcome.
Hey, Dan. Good evening.
Good. I see you got the audio on. I've had some technical problems tonight, and so I'm just calling in now. But it's a hassle. We're not on Ustream. We're on Justin.tv. So, but I put a thing up anyway, so it shouldn't affect you. But welcome, and we also have another gentleman in the 256 area code. What's your first name?
This is Jason Nunnelley.
Jason, how you doing? You're the gentleman I chatted with earlier, right?
Yes, you are. Yes, I
okay,
am.
Cool. All right. Okay, when you talk, is it okay if I put your picture up, or do you want to be incognito?
No, that's fine. You can do that.
Okay. All right. Well, since Jason wants to talk about the debt ceiling, and so I think the first thing we should talk about is that. But first, let me just tell folks who are listening or watching that what you can do is go to my Google Plus profile page. I've got all the stories we're going to talk about there with links and that sort of thing, and some interesting comments. One was from Jason. That's why I asked him to call in, because I thought what he said was really, really great. An astute observation. So, and I know Bret Hrbek is a former vice mayor of Front Royal, and I'll have their pictures up shortly. But again, I apologize. I'm having a glitch with we use Wirecast software, and normally we stream on Ustream, but I was sitting here in a panic. My assistant was freaking out because I was freaking out. But anyway, so what I'm going to do is, I guess first of all, Bret, what do you think about where we are right now? With the debt ceiling negotiations, and where should we be?
Where should we be? We shouldn't even be at this point, frankly. I mean, we shouldn't have come to this close to having to have this issue if we had serious players sitting at the table who were willing to do what's right for the country to move us forward in a way that makes sense for the economy. So, I mean, that was a bunch of political gobbledygook right there. We should be balancing a budget. We should be the government should be doing the exact same thing that you and I have to do at our kitchen tables every night, and make sure that we live within our means. And yeah, we can borrow a little bit on credit, but we also know at some point down the road we have to pay that back. And unfortunately, we are at that road now. And the president has not been able to show any kind of leadership whatsoever, and I don't think it should be any surprise that he hasn't, because we didn't expect him to, because he showed no sign of leadership in his entire career. So it's a disappointment, frankly. That's what it is. Okay,
well, let me get Jason in here. I'll try to steal his picture from his Plus profile. I had to ask you first, because YouTube always makes me say this, and I don't want, in case you're some copyright troll or something, I don't want you to go after me for using your picture. I'm gonna read what Jason said, and then we're gonna ask him to talk about it. Well, he said the story was from Reuters. U.S. likely to lose its top rating. Several economists are saying this. Even if we pass the debt ceiling, I was listening to Rand Paul on Sean Hannity's show, and he was saying that the government basically doubled the amount of currency, the amount of dollars that exists since the crisis in '08, and that is going to sort of the Zimbabwe effect, where you keep printing money, or in the case as the Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke said on 60 Minutes, it's more like adding zeros to the big banks' accounts to put more money into the system. You get the Zimbabwe effect, where you're gonna, you end up, if you follow it to its crazy conclusion, you're paying, $1 trillion for lunch at the fast food place, and that's literally what's going on in Zimbabwe. So what Jason said here, it's going to make all the. My question was, what will really happen? What impact will it really happen if our AAA debt bond rating is lowered? And it's been that way for about a century. And Jason had a really interesting observation. He said it's going to make all imports more expensive, because the value of the U.S. dollar is tied tightly to the solidity of the U.S. dollar printing company. It's going to be bad. On the other hand, as long as you're not a tree hugger, we'll soon be a new manufacturing center of the Americas. We have a strong, centralized socialist government, a large workforce, Soon, sweetheart deals for dirty industry willing to invest in U.S. jobs and government officials. Bret Hrbek and I know all about that from Avtex days in Front Royal, Virginia, as well as one of the most reliable industry infrastructures in the world. They'll watch the U.S. currency value drop and think, wow, what kind of a deal are we getting on the U.S. labor today? And it's long overdue. There's no logic on the continual denial that America's bankrupt. We spend as much as the federal level alone. At the federal level, as all the U.S. corporations hold in cash reserves, we're not a successful free market economy anymore. So I can't expand on that. Jason, tell me, what do you base it? I mean, you're a frustrated voter. It sounds like, or a citizen, I should say.
Well, you could take that comment to either be rather Pollyannic or extremely fatalistic. But the fact of the matter is, and if you'll indulge me in explaining my worldview as a baseline, that's what you're asking me to do. If you look at the government today, and you look at virtually all regulatory actions from the federal government, and I think you can take this down to state and local governments as well, we have the best government money can buy. And that's been the case for a long time. If you look at, I'll take one example, the incandescent light bulb. The incandescent light bulb as a portion of whether you believe that CO2 emissions are a big problem or whether you believe that simple overuse of energy is a problem, the fact is the incandescent light bulb doesn't contribute significantly to that problem. I just had a new roof put on my house. No one regulated that I put something in my attic to limit the amount of money I spend on the air conditioning. And it's a matter of dollars, which is a pretty good translation of energy consumption. My electric bill due to cooling my home in the Southeast is significantly higher than turning all my incandescent light bulbs on 24 hours a day. It just isn't significant. So what was the financial influence? Was it about CO2 emissions? Was it about the environment? Absolutely not. It was because the company that was making incandescent light bulbs wasn't contributing as much money as the company that wanted to force people to buy CFLs. Plain and simple. If you look at the history of American power production, if you look at where we spend money, we are talking seriously after Chernobyl, after 3 Mile Island, after Fukushima. We're seriously discussing federally funding new nuclear power plants in the United States. Why? Is that the cleanest, best power source that we can generate? Absolutely not. Put 10 more dams on 10 more rivers. We know for a fact that that pays us back 100-fold. It's far cheaper in the long run. And unlike nuclear power, which we've seen is extremely expensive and destructive when it goes bad, we virtually never have those kind of problems from damming up rivers. So is it because the Sierra Club has so much power and control? Likely not. It's because the nuclear power industry has bought and paid for the right people in D.C. So if you look at this trend, and then the trend of the dollar, which if you look at it, the issue right now at hand is not whether or not the value of the dollar should be rated as lower than it was a year ago or 2 years ago. We've printed more money. This used to be the talk of paranoid conspiracy theorists about the Federal Reserve and the limited banking system where they dole out fractional banking. This used to be something that only a handful of nut jobs like Ron Paul used to talk about, and now it's out in common conversation. Virtually anyone buying stocks in the market, virtually anybody buying any kind of investment for futures or trying to invest to keep their dollar from devaluing to nothing, they're clearly aware that the dollar shouldn't be considered as valuable as it was 2 years ago. And I think saying that we've doubled the monetary supply is really understating the impact of what we've done to prop up this economy for the past 24 or 48 months. And I would go back before Obama. This was happening under the Bush administration. Extremely loose behavior. That's how we got into the housing crisis. So I don't know how you can look at what's going on in this country and see anything possible but a devaluing of our currency internationally. China is already looking as desperately as possible to get out of U.S. dollars. They're already looking to change international trade from U.S. dollar currency to other forms of trade. They've been openly shopping an independent international currency market, and it's just a matter of time before that successfully happens. We're only 300 million people. We can only bomb so many countries. We can only force so much influence. Eventually, the U.S. dollar is going to default. And whether we raise the debt ceiling or not, that's an inevitability. We're not solvent. We've spent more money in the past 24 months in deficit than every U.S. corporation holds in cash by anybody's estimations. It's an astounding amount of debt that we've piled on. At some point, you have to pay that back, or you have to admit to the world that our only method of dealing with our financial problems is to simply print more money. And why would you continue to buy U.S. currency? Why would you continue to buy U.S. debt if you know that all we're going to do is continue to devalue that currency and to devalue that debt?
Brett,
it doesn't make sense.
Jason, let me bring Brett in here. Brett, he brings up an interesting analogy, and he's right to the extent if there's a financial interest in something, then you tend to see. I mean, the reason we're all fat is because there's no financial interest in getting your kids to eat fruits and vegetables. You know, there's financial interest in the fancy box with the sugar fat stuff and the cartoon character on it. So and also, you know, they've just gotten better and made stuff taste better over the years, but things that our behavior largely is dictated by the marketing we get and the laws that are passed by a Congress that gets donations from these companies and the marketing that is funded by companies with a vested interest in spending that money to get that impact. So I guess he has a point. What are your thoughts on this?
No, there's no question that the policies in Washington are the result of big government and big business in bed together, one feeding off the other. Big government can't survive without big business feeding it, and big business can't create the monopolies and oligarchies that they have in the economy without big government regulating it as such. And until time that we can break that divorce those two from one another, we are going to be down that path. That's the way it's going to work. Because you can't help it. If you look at every significant piece of legislation over the past at least 2 years, the exact enemies that the president was accusing of bringing destruction on the economy and on the country were the exact same people that were writing the legislation. Wall Street wrote the financial regulation bill. The health care bill was written by the big pharmaceutical companies and big insurance companies. And if you follow the dollars, Tim Carney's done a great job writing about this in the book called Abominomics. And he does this at the Washington Examiner all the time, following where the dollars go, who's giving what to who, and then who's sitting at the table with who. And there's a clear correlation between the two. Now, that's not to say that every congressman and senator is on the take. I don't believe that. I believe there's some people on the right and some people on the left that are up there because they believe exactly what they're saying. They walk the walk and talk the talk. But I think for the most part, you've got big companies who are in bed with big government, who are in bed with the bureaucracy, and they're all entrenched. And every institution, its first priority is survival, so they're all out there trying to figure out how the best way to continue their existence as opposed to doing their mission. So I completely agree with that. Getting rid of the income tax. You eliminate. If we got rid of the income tax in the United States, we get rid of a lot of these this collusion between the two, and I think you'd start seeing us go back to a fiscally sound policy where congressmen aren't going to sit there for careers because they're not incented to sit there for careers. They're going to sit there for a couple of years, do their public work, and then go back to the private sector, just as the founders had envisioned. So I agree completely.
Okay, there was a really good article in the Washington Post that I linked to on in my Google Plus profile. It's from June. It's by Ken Kessler. It's called. He's the fact checker, right, for the Post, and he talks about the debt ceiling. My first thing was when they were predicting this financial Armageddon that would happen if we breached it. Michelle Bachmann had this quote for which she was criticized roundly. She said, "Isn't it true that the government would default on its debt because very simply the Treasury Secretary can pay the interest on the debt first, and then from there we have to just prioritize our spending? And it is scare tactics because the interest on the debt isn't any more than 10% of what we're taking in. In fact, it's less than that." And then if you go down in this article, the debt ceiling was started in 1790 when the new country assumed the Revolutionary War debts of the states, and we've been breached. It was breached then because we deferred interest for a decade. It was breached arguably in 71, when President Nixon unilaterally broke with international agreements to trade dollars at a fixed rate of gold, which was $35 an ounce, the good old days, which I bought some, but I was 3, and what some would call an explicit default. But then when Franklin Roosevelt became president in the Great Depression, U.S. bonds had a clause that gave holders the option of being paid in gold coins. But Roosevelt wanted to depreciate the value of the dollar because, as we know, depreciation is the debtor's friend, relative to gold by more than 50%. So at the urging of the administration, Congress passed a joint resolution canceling all of its gold clauses. Holders of the bonds thus were denied an instant windfall. Congress, in essence, repudiated the government's obligations, and bondholders were left with depreciated paper money. So, Jason, first, how bad would it be August 3rd, August 4th, if an agreement is – it's likely there'll be some agreement, but if not, would this be the Armageddon that the administration would have us think it's going to be?
I think it's ridiculous to assume that it's anything near what the administration's talking about. It's much more practical to assume that it's going to have pretty negative consequences in both the U.S. markets and the foreign markets, and then especially in the value of the U.S. dollar. But it takes a long time for people to divest themselves of their currency investments in U.S. currency. It's not going to happen overnight. And this idea that they're going to stop paying Social Security checks is complete crap. The idea that, I'm sorry, that was a technical term. And the idea that we're going to default on our debt is untrue. The regulatory systems are set up in a way that that's just not going to happen. The fact is the Federal Reserve is itself a bank. It's structured in a way that is intentionally designed to be extremely secure for the debt holder and for the banker. It's just not going to happen.
Bret, what do you think?
We're not going to have a debate here. I mean, I agree completely that this is it's a bunch of scare tactics in order to try to rally the public on the side of continuing to spend on this path that we know where the ultimate end is going to be. In my practice day to day, the past couple of weeks, I've been hearing phone calls from folks asking me about, well, what happens if I don't get my Social Security check, or what's going to happen to the stock market when August 3rd or 2nd or whatever the date comes along. And I'm constantly having to battle that back and forth because it is starting to permeate the public that they're getting scared, and it's an absolute nonsense because we do have the revenues coming in. We do have the ability to make decisions on what we pay first. And I think I was reading an article yesterday that said this is going to probably come down to look very much like a government shutdown, and we lived through that. And you know what? I always wonder why, when we tell people if you're not essential, don't come into work, why they're employed by the government to begin with if they're not essential. But what we're going to find is we're going to have the same people that are not going to be working are the same people that didn't work during the government shutdowns. And one of the suggestions that was made, and this is kind of tongue-in-cheek, but the chef of the White House works during a government shutdown. So if the president and Mrs. Obama really want to contribute to saving those jobs and that debt ceiling, they'd cook their own eggs for breakfast as opposed to letting the chef come in. So I think it's a bunch of malarkey. Now, eventually, yes, if we continue to spend, if we will at some point run out of revenue, but we know, as was just pointed out, that if we've spent over the past 2 years in deficit spending more than the cash balances on companies in the United States, there's no way we can tax ourselves out of this issue. There's no way to raise enough revenue to cover it. We must cut back spending, and we must bring us back down to the constitutional levels that were mandated and given to us by our founders and our founding documents and our governing documents. And that's where the President of the United States has failed in leadership. He understands that that's where the Republicans were elected in last year. The quote, Tea Party Republicans were put there as a mandate that this is what they want to get done. And then he knows that this is a non-starter when he talks about revenue increases, and apparently he's the only one in Washington, D.C. with the idea that we need to raise taxes now instead of starting to cut back and bring us back just down to 2003 levels. It was right. George Bush, he spent almost as badly as Obama has, and we had 8 years of this kind of spending. So if we bring us back to the Clinton years of spending, we will be so much better off and start looking back to the balanced budgets and be able to get our fiscal house in order.
Okay, the only thing I would say, that essential, that's an easy target, but, like your bookkeeper doesn't have to come in today, but you got to have one. unless it's early April, then they got to come in today. But I always wondered if the guy, whoever puts toothbrush on the president's or toothpaste on the president's toothbrush, if he pays for that or if that's an essential employee. What do you guys think?
It's a tongue-in-cheek kind of suggestion, but the fact is that there are a lot of people out there that the government's employing that we don't need, and we know that because whenever it snows in Washington D.C. and all non-essential employees are told to go home, the government continues to operate.
True. Granted, yes. Okay. One of the things that was interesting today, Bernie Sanders, who's no right-wing radical. He's an independent liberal guy. He caucuses with the Democrats. He suggested it'd be a good idea for President Obama to get a challenge for the nomination. This hasn't happened since Jimmy Carter was challenged. What do you guys think? Jason, you think that makes any is this just nonsense?
Yeah, not going to happen.
Bret, what do you think?
I'd love it to happen. I doubt it's going to.
Okay, we're unanimous on that. Another thing, and I normally have my thing in order, but I don't because we had some technical glitches. But Jeff Jarvis had an off-color Twitter rant. This is funny. I wrote, Jeff Jarvis is a CNY professor who also started the magazine Entertainment Weekly, and he's just a wonderful media sensation. But he started this, I think it was like FU Washington or something hashtag, and like, by the time CBS did this story on it, almost 70,000 people had been doing this. There's a real sense of anger I see. Normally, this is a real wonkish issue, and I would guess 80% of Americans had no idea what a debt ceiling was until a few weeks ago. And is this? Do you think they'll all forget again, or do you think this is a new thing? I mean, it's always been passed since the history of time.
Yeah, I think they've really let the genie out of the bottle here. This was a mistake. I realized that the administration thought they were playing this game smoothly, but I think they've really made a huge mistake bringing this to the forefront. The concept that the U.S. government, the federal government, could actually run out of money, I don't think that's ever crossed your average big spend mentality. That brain has never thought of that. The idea you could possibly run out of funds. The idea that spending in deficit at some point has a cap. We saw this happen under the Reagan administration. And by the way, it's interesting that under the Reagan administration, they did debt ceiling limit raises over and over and over on 2-year periods. That wasn't a particularly big problem. The Obama administration seems to think that's just not going to happen. They can't accept it. It's an unacceptable solution. Nobody ever brought it to the forefront. The average American had no idea what was going on under the Reagan administration. By the way, one of the most irresponsibly spend-drunk presidencies ever.
Well, the Republicans under Bush were the Republicans under the last Bush were shockingly, spending like a drunken sailor. This is not a partisan thing.
Except as Reagan says, as Reagan says, the drunken sailors have the decency to spend their own money. But
Reagan raised the debt ceiling, I think, 18 times in 8 years. But it's just it's always happened. It's like this. Even if you keep your spending, just to adjust for inflation, the value of the dollar, you have to raise it over time. Even if you didn't spend any more money. You've got to have inflation increases over time. I mean, we can't spend what we spent in 1812, right? So every once in a while, you've got to raise the debt ceiling just to keep up with the effect of inflation.
Well, the interesting thing is, though, that this has become, as with buzzwords and as with the new tech of the day, this has now become a conversation at dinner tables, and it was not a conversation at dinner tables the 18 times the debt ceiling was raised under Reagan. And had it been, I think we'd have seen a really different presidency. Who would have thought about a president being reelected after this kind of catastrophic exposure? When you let people know your government is about to go bankrupt, that there is a decision in Congress that could actually bankrupt the government, that's a pretty severe, pretty dire situation that's been exposed to the American public that I don't think they're aware of. And this is a case where propaganda becomes reality. It was not a big deal The truth is, it wasn't going to end the world if the Congress couldn't come up with a deal that lasted more than 6 months. It wasn't going to change the political landscape of America. Now it might. It may have a serious impact.
Bret, what do you think?
Well, this has changed. The way we're talking about some of these things in Washington has really changed because it's seeped in. You can see the psyche of this Tea Party movement, but I think it also goes back to the 2008 financial crisis, where institutions that were thought of as foundations and pillars of the United States crumbled. The faith that you had in companies and the government was gone, and that has not recovered. We started with 2000 when the tech bubble blew up, and people's 401ks were slashed into what was jokingly called 201ks. The confidence just disappeared, and then you find Enron and WorldCom, some large companies doing shady dealings, and then 2008 when the big banks, that's where old people put their money in order to provide an income stream. That's your safe equity, was Citigroup and Bank of America and Merrill Lynch. And when those companies, these trademark, hallmark companies in the United States disappear, it's very difficult now to point your finger and say, you know what, this insurance company is really going to do something for you, or the government's going to back it up. Your guarantee is now a word that nobody believes any longer. And I think that if we hadn't gone through 2008, maybe we wouldn't be talking about this as much as we are right now. But we did go through that. People's confidence in foundational pillars of our country is now gone, and that's why I also kind of lend a little less credibility to the S&P and what they give us, because they're the ones that screwed up one of the people that screwed up 2008 so badly. So you tell a person that's a AAA rated company, and they say, oh yeah, so was Bank of America, and so was Lehman Brothers, and some of these big companies that are no longer with us anymore. So I think this is a kitchen table issue now, and people will be talking about it. However, when it ultimately comes down, we've seen it time and time again, when it ultimately comes down to Election Day, they pull the lever for the incumbent if they feel better about themselves and their personal wallets healthier, and they pull the lever for the challenger if it's the opposite. And I think that's ultimately what's going to come down to it, although we'll hear a lot of noise going into the Election Day.
Yeah, when Reagan said, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago, and everyone said a resounding yes. And as James Carville, wrote on that wall in the Clinton office, it's the economy's stupid. Yep. What do you think, guys? There was an interesting Ron Paul, who I genuinely like. I don't think we should go on the gold standard, I'm nervous about that. Some of his stuff, legalizing heroin, although he makes a good case. He said at the first Republican debate, he said, look, how many of you in this audience would start, if they legalized heroin, would start using heroin? Raise your hand. And everyone just started laughing. It's absurd. But if some hippie wants to go in the woods and smoke a joint, or if Willie Nelson wants to fill his tour bus up because he switched from alcohol to save his liver to pot, I don't care. I don't think it's anybody's business what Willie Nelson does in his tour bus. And we've lost the war on drugs, although I don't want a pregnant woman shooting heroin. But I think we spend a lot of money on this, and it's turning these kids into criminal record holders and this sort of thing. But there's a lot to like about Ron Paul, and he's a wonderful speaker when you see him at these debates. I love having him in there. And he's just gotten this big Iowa endorsement. Some of his ideas, like not going to Iraq, seemed, he would get booed off the stage almost last time. This time, we should leave Afghanistan isn't so radical as it seemed among the Republican audience before. Are Republicans coming around to him, or is he still the guy you love, but you don't think he has a prayer's chance in November, so he's not going to possibly win, has a shot at the nomination? Jason, what do you think?
No shot. But I do think, well, he doesn't have a shot. He's not mainstream. He's not making deals. His fundraising capacity stinks. There's too many legitimate real-world problems with his campaign. Now, does he have a shot of making it? Also, Ross Perot, for example. Ross Perot's second time around. I think that kind of impact is possible. But as far as him actually winning the nomination of the party, he has no chance.
Yeah, if he ran as an independent, Obama would be guaranteed, I think, a victory.
Yeah.
And Ross Perot did an important thing. He made the budget deficit a big issue, and we ended up balancing the budget or coming close to it. And for the first time in a long time, under the Clinton administration, a lot of that was that the Dow, I think, tripled, and it was a rosy economy. But what do you think? Are you is there going to be a Ron Paul sign in your yard, Bret?
No. Although I've been a fan of Congressman Paul since the past decade or so, there is some kind of pragmatism you have to bring to the political office. You obviously have to realize if you want to move the ball forward, you've got to work with people even if you don't agree with them, and unfortunately he doesn't do that. However, I think he contributes something to the primary field for the Republicans as well in the Congress, because he is pulling the candidates a little bit in his direction. I think he made the observation that what was considered 4 years ago fringe stuff he's talking about, now it is becoming more mainstream in the Republican Party. We're looking at the Federal Reserve, and we're asking questions about is it the legitimacy of it, and is it doing the right thing, and should it be audited? Should it have some better oversight? Iraq and Afghanistan are starting. I disagree with him on those wars, but they are starting to become more acceptable in the Republican ranks. So I think the party has started to move in his direction. For the most part, overall, I think that's a healthy thing. So I think he does contribute something to the process, but he won't be the presidential candidate. I believe that. That's something I'd lay my money on, and I'm a pretty conservative bettor. So but you're not going to find that on my side. Although I secretly hope that he continues to beat a couple people's butts.
Well, Bret, let me ask you this: what is your view on the Afghanistan war?
I think that I think one, it was the right thing to do as a country to go after that, and I think that we may have taken our eye off the ball a little bit, but I think there was some optimism that we were doing that we were winning when we went into Iraq. But I think this president continues to signal that we're pulling out on all fronts and has not been aggressive on the right way in foreign policy. So it's sending messages to our enemy that lay low a while, let you feel good about it, get out of there, and then we're going to just take it over when you're gone. So I'm still a supporter of it. Maybe it's a little nationalistic to be supportive of it, but when I think we put troops in harm's way, you gotta back up the policy. Otherwise, you're endangering those lives.
Well, okay, they're simply employing the effective strategy George Washington used against the British and Ho Chi Minh used against us. If you're shoe cobblers or rice farmers by day and terrorists at night, you don't know who the enemy is, and eventually the war will become unpopular at home, and they'll run out of money or patience back home, and you'll just leave. Isn't that that's? Yep. I mean, George Washington George Washington knew that if we had a knockdown drag out with the British, we'd lose. And so we employed these guerrilla tactics against the British, and that, we won over time when it became unpopular over in the UK. Isn't that what Afghanistan's doing?
Yeah, and that's why I think that we need to make sure that we're helping them establish the infrastructure to allow a free market economy to blossom there, which it seemed to be that they were on that track. From what I mean, I'm not there. I'm not an expert in it, but from what I was understanding, it looked like you did start seeing entrepreneurs pop up, and I think that we need to be there long enough for them to have that small economy start to blossom and take hold. Because I think there's the McDonald's theory, where two countries that have a McDonald's, if you have a country economy that's going to support a company like a McDonald's in it, they're not going to go to war with each other because that's the mutually assured destruction type of attitude. So we need to allow them to have something to lose. And if the people have something to lose, they have their private property rights, and they have basic human rights, and they have good water and good sewer systems and jobs. And if they can lose that because the Taliban is going to come back in and just wipe it all back out and throw them back into the Stone Ages, then you start seeing a public that's going to start supporting the United States' effort and freedom's effort and liberty, as opposed to the tyranny that Islamofascism brings with it.
I think first of all that they have a corrupt government there, and I think that you draw too rosy a scenario than is possible in Afghanistan. I mean, this country's basically, in the medieval times. I think there are areas where 90% of the people can't read.
Call me George Bush then.
George Bush, who refused to use the word recession because it was, he said, if I say the R word, then it might impact the economy. What do you think, Jason?
We definitely, the love fest has ended, and we are no longer an echo chamber. I don't, I love the men who came home after Vietnam. I'm very proud of them. The men who chose not to skip out on their obligation, that had the patriotism and the honor to go fight a war that most of them knew deep down inside was a terrible idea, was not good for the country, was not going to end well for anybody. I love those guys, and I respect them. And I have more respect for them than I do the guys that skipped out. But the fact of the matter is, everybody, in hindsight, knows Vietnam was a terrible idea. Everybody knows it. You look at Afghanistan and Iraq, and in 20, 30 years, those are going to be the hallmark examples of how to destroy an empire. The idea of empirical colonization through culture at the end of a gun doesn't work long term. If you look at what destroyed the great empire of Britain, it looks a lot like what's going on presently with the United States of America. What we're doing in Afghanistan is a noble cause, and I like the idea behind it, and I speak to servicemen all the time who tell me they're proud of what we're doing in Afghanistan, and I can empathize with that. I definitely appreciate their sacrifice. But the end result is it's been incredibly expensive. It didn't end terrorism. It doesn't, disposing of certain men is much more effective if you do it quietly, clandestinely. If you look at our relationship with China, which was a much bigger risk in the 70s and the 80s than most people ever realized, once it went from the battlefield to the true cultural exchange, that's when we started having an increase in safety for the average American. And I think the same thing happens with the Middle East. If you get involved in the Middle East with guns, you get foot on ground and put our soldiers at risk and our financial institutions at risk by spending trillions of dollars that we do not have, that is not going to end well for anybody.
All right, Bret. Yeah, Bret is a loyal Republican. He's he's a good guy. I'm not thrilled with how we're doing there. I'm not sure. I think now is just saving face. You don't want to just leave and let it collapse and make it look like, we had to go in there because they were harboring bin Laden, and then bin Laden went to Pakistan.
Well,
Huh?
I don't know. I think I'd be tempted to challenge that idea. I don't know how useful it is at this point, but there is this idea that we had to go in because of bin Laden. Well, we didn't have to go into Libya. We made tactical decisions about Libya, and that was a bona fide on-America terrorist act. And I've seen we've had all kinds of terrorist acts against the United States where we didn't invade a country.
If we had not gone, Jason, if we had not gone into Afghanistan, President Bush would have been impeached. And if his vice president, Cheney, who succeeded him, didn't go into Afghanistan, he'd have been impeached, all in about 2 weeks. There was absolutely no, America demanded that we go in there. When they refused to give him up, and he had, was basically in with that government, and they said that, they're going to harbor him, no American president would have, we had to go in there.
We didn't wage a multi-trillion-dollar war against Grenada. We didn't wage a multi-trillion-dollar war when we dealt with Libya. Let me be clear about this. I'm not suggesting that America should have, or in the future should, take a pacifist attitude about foreign nationals killing American citizens en masse. What I am suggesting is that this idea that we had to put this larger-than-life society reconstruction into play, it's a false god. There were other ways to go about dealing with the problem. The fact of the matter is, we didn't kill bin Laden in Afghanistan. That's a very important fact that people seem to just forget. We didn't find him. We didn't kill him. We didn't destroy Al-Qaeda by spending trillions of dollars in both Afghanistan and in Iraq. And I know this sounds kind of like the leftists talking about the war from an anti-war position, But I think another important fact to point out is Iraq had nothing to do with the trade towers. Zero. There was no connection.
Well,
so
it didn't have anything to do with the trade towers, but it. Well, I'm sorry, it didn't have anything to do with the trade towers, but it did have was in direct conflict with the new policy of the United States, and that was that we were going to consider any country that was harboring or supporting terrorists as the enemy, and we were going to take those out, and that's what he was doing. So yes, there's that. It's a very weak link to bring it back to 9/11. But
Bret, what do you
Saddam
mean?
Was harboring.
What do you
terrorists.
mean? Who? He hated bin Laden.
You mean sending $10,000 to each family of a Hezbollah or Palestinian who blew himself up to kill Israelis?
Well, are we invading Palestine? Are we invading Palestine?
No, but we had made a policy that any country that harbored or supported terrorism would be was an enemy of the United States.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean you invade them. That's crazy, Bret. I mean, the whole thing was weapons of mass destruction. They sent Colin Powell out there to show all the evidence that they had produced to match the theory and the narrative that they wished to push forward, and it turned out it was all nonsense.
Which every secret organization in the world believed, by the way.
I don't dispute that, and I don't dispute that Saddam Hussein wanted the image that he had weapons of mass destruction out there to keep Iran from attacking him in retribution for the war that he fought with Iran for so long and started. But Saddam was a bad guy.
I'm not sure
I'm
not sure he didn't even know it.
Well,
I'm not even sure that he didn't know it, but
there's a lot. Yeah, a lot of these are houses of cards that when they get knocked over, you realize, like the East German secret police. It was like 12 guys in a back room, but the image, the Wizard of Oz effect.
That brings back to a point that I made before, which is there's this false god. There's this idea that if you take this monolithic approach to dealing with international disagreements or international violence, that you can create a solution that works. This idea that George Bush, I think actually Bret articulated this very well. Bush had a clear policy, and he stated it multiple times. I don't think that was the end sales pitch for going into Iraq. Obviously, he went into the weapons of mass destruction idea. But the fact is, there was this policy under the Bush administration that we're going to participate in regime change, and we're going to participate in these monolithic societal change policies of going into a country and democratizing the country at the end of the gun. And that's what we did in Vietnam. That's what we did in Korea. That's what we've done in failed attempt after failed attempt. And I think it continues to prove itself to be a bad idea.
All right, let me tell you guys a quote here. This is from Iraq. This is a guy who's in charge. This is what he wrote. I am deeply concerned about Iraq. The task you've given me is becoming really impossible. Our forces are reduced now to very slender proportions. The Turkish menace has gotten worse. Faisal's playing the fool, if not the knave, as incompetent Arab officials are disturbing some of the provinces, failing to collect the revenue. We overpaid on last year's account, which is almost certain Iraq will not be able to pay this year, entailing blah, blah, blah. I don't see what political strength there is to face a disaster of any kind. I don't believe that in any circumstances any large reinforcements will be sent from here, from India. There is scarcely a single newspaper which is not consistently hostile to our remaining in this country. The enormous reductions which have been formed here would gain popularity by ordering an instant evacuation. Moreover, in my own heart, I do not see what we are getting out of it, owing to the difficulties. No progress has been made in developing the oil. Altogether, I am getting to the end of my resources. On and on, I feel that I am trying to tame an ungrateful volcano. Do you know who wrote that, either you guys?
Colin Powell. No.
1 September 1922, Winston S. Churchill, who was governor of Iraq.
I knew you were going to say Churchill.
In a letter to the Prime Minister, I feel that I'm trying to. I swear to God, it could have been written 10 years ago. And I remember when Schwartz, when we went and we kicked Saddam out of Kuwait, and then all Americans realized that we weren't going to go into Baghdad. We were just going to kick him out of Kuwait. We weren't going to, kill him and all that. And Americans were like, what in the world? And I think Schwarzkopf said something like, who the F made that decision? And it was the president. and he said, if we go into Baghdad, we'll be there for 20 years. When you go in there, you own it, and there's no getting out. And I think that the elder Bush was right, and as Gates said, the next Secretary of Defense who thinks we should invade a Mideastern country should have his head examined. I think clearly the president was affected by 9/11, as we all were, and we were all in a different frame of mind, and it seemed like a good idea at the time. And now we're stuck over there. We're, getting ready to run out of money, even though we've doubled the amount of money we have on paper and inflation. That's the reason everything's so expensive now. It isn't because of inflation. It's because the dollar's weaker. Gas wouldn't be this high if the dollar was stronger. Food wouldn't cost this much, all the food we import, because the dollar's not worth as much because we kept printing it after '08. But anyway, all right, let me go ahead.
There's one more thing that's going on, though. I would like to point out that that's a very valid point. The dollar devaluing is costing the American citizen, and quite frankly, is a big cause of the Arab Spring. It's a big part of their food cost. It's causing famine in Africa. That's all true, but I'll tell you, there's some pretty significant realities out there with the way the world works. Things happen. We have pestilence. We have famine. And one of the things that we seem to have forgotten in America, and we seem to have a government that actually abhors savings and fiscal responsibility on a personal level. This idea that the president keeps talking about how all these greedy corporations are holding on to their cash and refusing to invest in the economy. Sometimes having reserves is a really good idea. And I think that's something we should keep in mind, whether it be food preserves, land preserves, cash reserves. The idea that what we're looking at is also being compounded by the fact that we've had some pretty bad situations. We've had floods, we've had droughts, there's been some problems with food supplies. So, when you get Japan, for example, the second biggest economy in the world just got kicked in the teeth. And by the way, a country that is more than 100% GDP in the tank with debt, and look at how it's affecting their ability to recover. So there are more factors than just the devaluing of the U.S. currency, but it definitely doesn't help.
But Jason, one of the first things you talked about, you used the term financial incentive, and that's what it's not that the politicians wouldn't like to have a balanced budget. It's that there's no financial incentive to do that, because the way that they get reelected is by building the bridge in your district and cleaning up the Avtex plant in Bret's district. That's the fact of life, and that's why even the Republicans who were preaching fiscal responsibility spent like crazy during the Bush years. But anyway, there's a few more topics. Let's totally shift gears here, because there's some other stuff I posted on my page on Google Plus, and some people were arguing back and forth about it, and so I got to hit them. So let's go to a business topic here. Borders Books is closing. It's going to be 10 or 11,000 jobs gone. That I think in June, what was it? The economy grew by 18,000 jobs, so we're losing 10 or 11. Plus Cisco is about 3 or 4. Some of that through attrition or early retirement. But there was an interesting thing about Borders viewing it as a victory for technology and a victory for writers, because it's the old system. It's very expensive to have a bookstore like Borders, because you've got to have this huge stock, and they charge a tremendous markup, like 100%, but they're not selling everything. But you've got to have a big volume in order to attract people. And then they would make their money on the things, the best sellers, but then Walmart and all these other stores started selling them at crazy low prices, so they were losing that. And they just can't compete with Amazon. Books are things that are cheap to ship, that you don't have to try on, do very well online. I'm not buying an anvil on eBay, but and I'm not, a woman's not going to buy a pair of jeans without trying them on, right? But a lot of stuff does very well on online, and books are one of the things. They're cheap to ship. So, but the whole model now, you've got some writers out there who are selling their books online themselves. They control the entire process, and they can make I think John Grisham or somebody, I don't know what he makes on a book, couple bucks, $3 maybe, and you can make that easily. You could charge $5 for your book, and by the time whatever bookstore is selling it online takes their cut, you're still making more than you would from a traditional book, and so you can sell fewer and do better, and you have control of the whole process. What do you think about the whole notion of the business model from the writer's perspective? Or I mean, is it, this person was arguing that in some ways it's a good thing that we're shifting from these big retail things all controlled by these giant companies, just like the way the music industry shifted, and it's sort of more control on the artist, and that the writers can earn more money by selling their product and have more control, and that the singers are going back to like the old days when they actually used to make most of their money performing their music live and the ticket sales. What do you guys think? Jason, you got any thoughts on this?
Oh, absolutely. I think if you look at the Trent Reznor model that he's experimented with free downloads and donations, if you look at the various people, there's multiple music distribution centers out there now, Spotify, I'm sure Google Music's going to have a commercial offering, Amazon with MP3s, of course the infamous iTunes. In all of these cases, you have taken the middlemen who used to take the lion's share of profits out of the equation. And anytime that you shrink the market between the producer and the buyer, you increase revenues for the person that's actually producing. Now, on the other hand, every time in a free market that you have change, you have destruction. There's destruction of infrastructure, there's destruction of individual lives that were built on that model. In the case of Borders, 10,000 employees, I'd be interested to know how many of those employees were making more than double minimum wage. I'm not really that concerned about that impact on our economy, and I don't think we should be. Now, obviously, that's another drain on the unemployment checks going out, and obviously it's a bad time. We have a pretty rough economy already, and we don't need anybody to be unemployed. But I don't think it's a bad thing. I think anytime you have a technological advancement, anytime you have an increase in efficiency in the marketplace, you're going to have some costs. They're temporary. You can have some major benefits. Those are long-term.
I hope their retirement package wasn't tied to their stock, because that's pretty worthless. That's down there. Bret, what do you think about this whole notion?
Well, I tend to agree that the closer you can get the manufacturer to the consumer, you're obviously going to have a better pricing for the consumer and more money for the manufacturer or the creator of it. You do have to feel some sympathy, I think, for especially those that was their livelihood. I don't think it has a major impact on the overall economy, but for the individual that's unemployed, that obviously it hurts them quite a bit. The only thing I haven't seen is anybody address is there. I think bookstores, and that's why I don't think bookstores in general are going to go away. Some of these models might change. Bookstores are a good place, I think, for unknown authors to be able to appear. For example, people like to go browse the books and spend hours in the bookstore, and they're going to find hidden gems that they might not be able to find if all they were doing was looking through Amazon. I think Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com, these kind of websites really allow, when you know exactly the book you're looking for, the author that you're looking for, the subject you're looking for, and you can go and type that in and find it specifically. And maybe I'm strange in this, but I don't go and just browse those websites looking for an interesting book that I want to take with me on a vacation. So I think that local bookstores are going to benefit from this, and you still probably will have Books A Million or Barnes & Noble type of stores out there. But I'm not opposed to progress for the sake of progress. If I was opposed to that, we'd still be riding horses, because I was afraid the whip makers were going to lose their jobs. So I don't mourn the decline of a company that's the time has passed it by.
Yeah, I think so. I think that I'm going to move on, but there are three things that the traditional model, it does have its advantages. One is they've got money. If they believe in you, they can back you and put the marketing out there to get people to be exposed to your good product. Two, they provide a weeding out process. By and large, most of the people who a major label sinks $1 million in promoting and recording, normally they're pretty talented and they're pretty good. Anybody can can record a song or write a book. Anybody can do that, but not everybody should. Having been a karaoke host for 14 years, I can tell you, not everyone should be singing. And the third thing that they do is just with the talent they have. Like if you've ever seen the movie about the Jackson family, Michael Jackson and his brothers, how they would go and Motown was really like a factory. They would take these young, unpolished kids, and they would, they had the band downstairs. The Smokey Robinson was writing the songs. They'd make the records. They'd produce, and they would just. It was a machine that turned out and created this incredible Motown period of this wonderful, from post doo-wop era, great, largely African American music. And those kids would still, those brothers and sisters might still be on Jackson Street for all we know if it hadn't been for Berry Gordy and that machine. So, so another thing I want to talk about was both you guys are on Google+. I think Bret is not as big a user as I am or Jason is, but I saw an article on a PC Mag. I guess it's PC Mag now because it's not a magazine anymore. It's an online magazine. But it said among their user base, 50% will leave Facebook for Google+. And I think my thing was I thought that was insane. It's not a representative sample. I found early on and still most of the people are techies, tech-friendly people, whereas in Facebook that's probably not the case. Just because Facebook is so mainstream now with 750 million plus users. I think there's 20 million plus, so there's about 3%. The user base of Google Plus is only about 3% of what Facebook's is, so it hasn't. I mean, if you're on it, you assume everyone's on it. We talk about it all the time, and half the posts initially were about how awesome Google Plus is and making fun of Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook and that sort of thing. But I think that the PC Magazine, their sample is techies. And do you think that our soccer moms and the grandpa who would get on Facebook to talk to the grandkid, are they going to find Google Plus as inviting and as useful, do you think, Jason?
Oh, finally a subject I'm qualified to talk about. I think, yeah, I do actually. I think they're going to find it very useful. I think because of Gmail, my grandmother uses, she's 90, she uses Gmail. I think when they start integrating that more aggressively and they promote it to her, she's much more likely to get on to Google Plus and see the pictures of grandkids and great-grandkids. It's easier to use than Facebook. I think the UI development team over at Google is much better about responding to consumer interest. They seem to have a different paradigm over there. On the other hand, do I think the average user is going to get on there in the next 3 to 6 months? No. It's such an echo chamber. The fact of the matter is, of everyone that I do business with, I would say virtually none of them even are aware of Google Plus at this point. So
yeah, it is. It's a geek fest. Yeah, it's a.
Well, did you ever get on Friendseed?
Friendster?
No, not Friendster. Friendseed.
No.
We're really gonna. Yeah, now we're gonna really find out who the real geeks are. So Robert Scoble, who is one of the big trend pushers in that elite techno user world, he was a big Friendseed fan. He got mad at Twitter, and they were promoting other people and wouldn't promote him, so he went over to Friendseed. And Friendseed was pretty much what Google Plus is now, with a couple of extra bells and whistles, and you could pull your feeds in from all your other social medias. You could pull in your Facebook post, your Twitter post. It would all come into Friendseed, and so you could go take a look at everything from everywhere. It was kind of a cool place to push people to centralized feed location. And Scoble was a big fan, and in the little microcosm of the tech community, mostly Silicon Valley types and startup people, it looked like it was going to probably take over the Facebook world. It looked like it was going to be the next Facebook, or the next MySpace, as Facebook once said. In the end, it got bought by Facebook, and the purchase, that process of being bought out, killed it, because the consumers knew that it wasn't going anywhere. It's still a cool place. You can still go get an account. You can still get a lot of information. There's still an active community, but it died on the vine. So the reason I bring that up is that a lot of times we get this idea that a particular social media environment is going to explode based on the way tech people perceive it. And if you'd have asked your average techie when MySpace was the biggest thing going, where that was going to go, universally we would have all said, in the toilet. It's a terrible product. It's a terrible place to meet people. It's an awful social media experience. It's designed bad. It's slow. And yet it was fairly successful until Facebook took over.
Bret, what do you? And I'll just say, Jason, you're doing fine. I don't know if you have a degree in debt ceiling technology, but you're doing just fine thus far on everything we've talked about. Bret, what do you think? What are your thoughts? I mean, is this will the soccer moms adopt this? You've been playing with this, and you're not really a geek. I mean, you're technology friendly, and you're not an idiot, but you're not like, there's no pocket protector in your shirt.
Well, I cover it up, but I've been on it since Friday, and I really haven't had a whole lot of time just to sit down and just really play with it. And I've been using it. I have been using it on my iPhone a little bit. That's where I actually got it set up. And today was the first day I really actually got a chance to sit down and really look at it on my computer itself. And I think it's just I'm conservative by nature, I guess, because it's going to take me a little while to peel away from something I'm familiar with, and that is Facebook. But I do like the dimensions of being able to have these circles where I can post certain things for certain people, and I think that there are some neat facets to this. And I don't use Gmail. I don't use some of the other Google features like Google Docs and stuff. So I'm not sure how it all integrates together. But I do know a lot of people that do, and I think that's Google's certainly going to have an advantage and leg up. They'll be able to just bring that over from those other consumers that are using their other products. So is a soccer mom going to do it? I don't know. But I probably would have been the one that told you that AOL is going to be the monster, and it's going to be the internet leader for a long, long time, 10 years ago. And I just realized the other day when I saw an AOL account that I haven't seen one of those in years. So I'm probably not the best prognosticator of future technology.
Well, you never know. At least we don't have to get the discs in the mail for AOL anymore. I got two more quick topics. Two more quick topics we got to hit because I posted about them, and I think Netflix. Everyone got angry at them, and then I've told the story a couple of times, but I'll tell it again because it's great. That they had the price increase because they were spending too much money shipping these discs for what they were charging. It was like a $2 extra thing, and they were losing money on it. And their shares initially went up, but they dropped 6% because they today because when they announced their results, because they said that their outlook is dim because they're not going to have the explosive growth that they're known for because everyone's angry at them about this price increase, and then then they went down and they got hit because they had bad communication. And I texted the vice president, and he texted me back and told me not to text him, to email him, and then he never emailed me back. So when he, I don't know if he's hiding under his desk or if he's arrogant or what, but if he ever wants to respond to my email, I'd appreciate it. But also, Netflix is going to face some new competition, it seems. Walmart, with their purchase of Vudu, is going to get into the streaming and disc rental business. And they were in it before, and they got out of it and just referred their business to Netflix. But they're kind of they're under assault from their customers and from Wall Street. But I still think it's a good deal. I don't have a problem paying $16 or $20 a month for unlimited streaming and 1 or 2 DVDs in the mail. What do you think, Jason? Are you a Netflix fan?
Well, we are a Netflix family, actually. I'm one of those alpha quitters. Has spoken of irreverently on NPR. We don't have cable. We do have Netflix. I'm a pretty big fan of the product. But Netflix's real problem isn't that they're discontinuing their DVD distribution or splitting the DVD off of the streaming account. the real problem is not that they're going to raise rates. That ends up being a rate increase for people who are using both the DVD and the streaming. The fact of the matter is the real problem is their catalog. And if you look at the streaming catalog, the reason that they coupled the DVD rental with the streaming originally was that their catalog of streaming was pretty sparse. The industry was pretty unfriendly to them. They were unfriendly to the idea of streaming. And other companies have developed much friendlier relations with media companies. They're getting better product, they're getting better catalogs. And if Netflix had a catalog that, let's say, for example, had everything that was available on DVD, or let's say everything that made it into the top 10 or top 20 grossing films for the previous year, then I don't think you'd see a problem with Netflix future or Netflix revenue. When you think about Netflix, you're not thinking about premium product when it comes to movies. That's the real issue.
All right, what do you think, Bret?
I think those are great points. We're a Netflix family too. I have to tell you though, the reason we didn't jump on it because of the streaming, we didn't even jump on it for the convenience. We jumped on it because Blockbuster closed, and so did Movie Gallery, which are the only two games in town in Front Royal, Virginia, until one just recently opened up again. And we realized, my wife and I realized, if we wanted to watch a movie that wasn't on TV or at the movie theater, we had no place to go. So we signed up for Netflix, and we were enjoying it. And then one day we just happened to come across the fact that you could also access it by streaming online. And I find it wonderful for the iPhone and the iPad. My kids absolutely love it. But I think that's exactly right. I've been frustrated with some of the opportunities that you can watch, or the different the selection that you can watch, and I've been a little frustrated a couple times with some of the network interface. But I've used Vudu as well, and which I really enjoy. And I think that Walmart getting into the game, competing against Netflix, is going to either make Netflix better and more competitive, or it's going to drive them out of the business, and we'll have a better product at the end of the day.
Yeah, it was kind of like an old friend disappointing you because they've had such a good relationship with their customers. They're known for treating their employees fabulously, and they're just a great company with great service. And then they did this, and they did it in some flippant blog post when they announced it. And then the way that they, when they were down for hours, affecting millions of people, I mean, for like 5 or 6 hours, their Facebook page was blowing up with comments, people outraged, right on the heels of the price increase. And then for the vice president to acknowledge that, he's alive, and he texts me, and then he doesn't respond, and they didn't put anything on their Facebook page or their Twitter page. They didn't put anything on either of their blogs. And you'd think that someone at a modern technology, entertainment, media streaming company would know how to operate their Twitter page, their Twitter account. So it just strikes me as sort of arrogant, or I don't know what their deal is. But I got one last story, and I want to say I think one real winner in the Netflix issues going on right now is Redbox, because I don't know for you guys, but I have several times on an impulse gotten a movie from Redbox because I thought, well, it's just ghetto stuff on Netflix. When I got home, I realized that they had it. Netflix had it, and I didn't have to pay the $1 or whatever, but it was $1, so who cares? And Redbox, though, I'd like to see about 4 of those machines everywhere they have one, because sometimes there's a line, but that's a terrific deal. And I doubt really at $1 a movie, if you actually return it the next night or the next day and only pay $1, I doubt it's any more expensive. I mean, I don't know how much time either you guys have to watch movies. Maybe with kids it's different, but I think that's pretty. I think they're a winner in this. The more Amazon charges for their DVD by mail service, the more attractive Redbox, and that place that also charges $1 in Front Royal. You're seeing it's kind of a resurgence now in these little mom and pop video stores, which Airalls and then Blockbuster just totally ran out of the market. You're seeing these guys with some old back catalog. Everyone's got DVDs. You can buy them cheap anywhere. I mean, yard sales or flea markets. And they're setting up these stores, these dollar rental places. And for $1, I don't mind if you don't have the newest release. I'll watch an old, whatever. I just think that's neat. That it's turned itself completely the opposite. Okay, now this is the most important story of the night. I know the debt ceiling was kind of a big deal, But this is the last story we got, and this is a big, big deal. McDonald's is pulling French fries from their Happy Meals. Currently, you have an option. When Bret takes his 17 kids to McDonald's, he says, "Okay, kids, would you like apple slices or McDonald's French fries?" And I don't know what they choose, but only 11% of the Happy Meals sold are the opt-in approach. Unlike Facebook with their privacy settings, McDonald's is opt-in on apples. So now they said, because nobody's doing it, I don't know if anyone got that joke, but because no one's getting them anyway, they're going to just make it mandatory. And I guess you can still buy fries, on the side. And they're getting rid of the caramel dip. So, the humanity. Bret, what's going to happen when you take your kids the first time and they can't have fries with their Happy Meal?
I thought I saw in the news that they were splitting the fries and the apples, and they were half fries, half apples automatically, but you could always ask for something different. I mean, I don't care. That's fine. I mean, it's just, if we don't like that, Burger King's right next to every McDonald's there is in the country, and we can go there if we want the kids to have French fries as opposed to some fruit, or Wendy's or any place else. So if that's what they want to do, that's fine. And there's a big enough marketplace for us to make decisions based off of that. So, and good for us if we let them eat apples, which typically we buy. We get one well, I don't like Happy Meals because I think they're excessively expensive. So, but if we do get them, we get one of the kids apples and one of them get French fries, and we make them share both. So
how much is a Happy Meal?
It's like $5 or something like that. So
are you serious?
I mean,
it's a burger and a little fries and a little toy and an apple juice, and it's $5.
I'll tell you what we do. Our kids like chicken nuggets, so I get the 20-piece McNuggets. I let all three of them share 20 pieces. I get a large French fry, or we get the apples, let them share that, and then get them some milk. That's what we do. And they get upset because they don't get a toy, but they have plenty of toys that I'm trying to get rid of.
It's one less thing you're going to step on in the car later.
Yeah.
So you're scamming McDonald's, basically. You're a frugal McDonald's shopper. What do you think, Jason? Is this the end of the world?
I was just shocked that two people still eat at McDonald's.
I can't believe
they have $1 billion.
Well,
they have a billion burgers.
They're great. I'm upset that they stopped changing the sign. Remember when the sign used to say? I think last one I saw was 60 billion served. They probably do that in a week now, but they used to change the number. I had a teacher who pointed this. Go ahead, Jason.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say, I think the last time I ate at McDonald's, I was overseas, and we needed a place to get in and out of the rain, literally. And there was a McDonald's. It was the only thing we knew how to order from. But why is it? You got to tell me, because I didn't read about this. I'd heard about it, and I've seen news clippings. There's a headline, but why is McDonald's getting rid of the French fry?
Because, well, they say it's, I don't know, but they say it's to respond to public demand. And I got to say, we love McDonald's because we have a great relationship. I own 3 newspapers, and we're in all the McDonald's, and so we're pro McDonald's. Go McDonald's. But I think it's responding. I guess in San Francisco, in some other localities, they're saying you can't. You're not allowed to have a toy with a kid's meal, and they're getting on about fat and nutrition. But they said we're responding to our consumers' requests. But if only 11% of the kids are choosing the apples, how are they responding to consumers' choice by getting rid of them? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So,
well, I asked because I assumed this was a Michelle Obama impact. Is the reason I was. I
think
don't know.
She's great.
I just kind of figured.
Let me get Bret, who hates the Democrats, hates too strong, maybe. Bret, you got to be honest, Bret. Tell me, Michelle Obama is doing a good thing, despite her 16,000 calorie splurge a couple weeks ago that Drudge made fun of. It's a good thing that she's doing. She's got that little garden growing out in the back of the White House, and she's making it an issue that people are talking about. I think it'd be great. You have a garden, Bret? Are you inspired by Michelle Obama to start gardening?
No. Well, I think my wife has some tomato plants on the pool deck only because the deer eat them otherwise. But I don't have a problem with the First Lady taking an issue, whether it's drugs or whether it's obesity and going out. It's a matter of when they start turning it into policy and dictating from Washington or from San Francisco City Hall. McDonald's being required or being banned to have toys, that's outrageous. The fact that they voluntarily, whether they have some kind of pressure from the White House and the First Lady's office or not, but they voluntarily making a change in their menu, so be it. I mean, they've done that enough. They've changed their French fry oil. They've changed the way they cook other things. They've decreased their portions and raised their prices. So, I mean, they've made some decisions. But if Michelle Obama wants to go out there and criticize, tell everybody else to eat their vegetables when her husband goes and eats a big old chili dog in front of everybody else, and that's fine. Let them do that. But just don't put it in the law. Don't tell me how to feed my kids at the point of a gun. That's where my problem is. If she wants to stand out in the rose garden and say, "Here, eat your vegetables because it's healthy for you, and here are the reasons why it'll keep you in a better fit and live longer," so be it.
Yeah, I agree that the toy ban is stupid. But I am in favor of putting the calories on the menu board so people know. And the Republicans always, it's burdensome regulation on small business. That's BS. They just, there's no, to turn this around from what Jason said at the beginning, there's no vested interest in a fast food place telling you how many calories are in the item. But, Americans are fat because we're not eating enough apples. So I think it's a good thing that McDonald's is doing. And
well, the same thing is telling the tobacco companies to educate people about why they shouldn't smoke. I mean, why would you tell a company to tell their consumers the bad things about their product? I mean, that's
because it's the only job. Because it's the only product that, when used as directed, will kill you. That's legal.
Can I inject a crazy idea, though?
I can't believe Bret is sitting here arguing against cigarette warning labels, which actually work. You should see the ones in Europe. I mean, you've basically got like a bloody lung plastered in full color on the side. It unfolds. You can see it, in magnifying glass included. Go ahead, Jason.
Well, I hate to do this, but I challenge the idea that the warnings at any level, whether it be enforced by government or whether it be market forces, I challenge the idea that the warnings or that the disclosure even is what makes changes in consumers. The fact is, and I made this joke originally about McDonald's, I'm kind of surprised there's 2 guys out of 3 that still consistently eat at McDonald's. My family hasn't, and I don't mean any disrespect to McDonald's. I know they're a wonderful American institution. We haven't eaten at McDonald's in a long time because we do care about health, and we eat at the same places pretty regular. We eat out a lot. And if you look at some of the trends, Subway, and you can make arguments that Subway put some junk in their food too, but the fact is consumers make a decision. We were originally talking about people getting fat. Well, rich people have already solved that problem. If you'll notice, rich people don't have fat kids. The market does change. People do eventually pick up on what's causing their children to get fat, what's causing them to be fat. The most successful books this year were dieting books. There were a multitude of dieting books. There's all kinds of shows about how to cook your food, how to prepare your food. This is a growing trend. So I'm not that concerned about it. I would like, personally as a consumer, if the people I buy food from are honest about what they put in their food. I'll tell you, while we're at it, how about telling me what the ingredients are so I can make a decision about being gluten-free or not eating genetically modified foods if I'm paranoid about that?
Oh, Bret, let me bring you in on this. Isn't that a burdensome regulation against small business to make them put ingredients on food? They all fought it. The Republicans were all against it.
I would say I'm against it because I would, as a consumer, I make that decision. So
how do you make a decision if you don't know? How do you make a decision if you don't know if it's got monosodium glutamate and it's going to give me a headache?
The decision is not to eat there because I don't have the information. So I can go, okay, I can either pack my own peanut butter and jelly sandwich with the ingredients when I'm traveling that I know are in there, or I can take a risk and go to McDonald's. And if McDonald's really wants enough people make that decision, McDonald's is going to start putting out their calorie counts. They're going to put out their ingredients. They're going to put out their secret formula, whatever it is. They're going to disclose what they need to do in order to get enough consumers to be profitable and have their business run. So I don't think it needs to come from Washington. I don't think it needs to come from Richmond. I think it needs to come from the consumers making decisions with their wallets. And if Burger King's going to put up those information and McDonald's not, and that's important for me, I'm going to Burger King.
Well,
and if
but
it's not
listen,
important for me, I'm going to go with the cheapest.
That doesn't work all the time.
Are you sure you're a Republican and not a Libertarian?
I'm more Libertarian.
He's both, but when he's in that ballot box, he's not voting for the Ron Paul, the independent candidate, former independent candidate.
Because I know pragmatically we need to move the country forward to the right, and you can't do that when you lose.
Well, I'll tell you, I think they don't always respond to what the consumer wants, because the consumer wants to be healthy, and a lot of them sell crap that because it tastes good and it's marketed well. And there's many government regulations that are very important. Things like the book The Jungle that came out that exposed the horrors in unsafe meat, and the government went in and created the FDA regulation of meat. And I think there wasn't a big demand until the book came out, and then the politicians made them do it. These guys will get away and they'll lie unless an inspector with a white glove comes in there and says, okay, you're shut down. And they still, there's still cases people die from food poisoning when someone slipped up. Or when some pigs ran through some, I didn't even know some of these fresh vegetables in restaurants can kill you. I had no idea. But anyway, we gotta cut it off because we're about 20 minutes over. Jason, do you have any final thoughts now that we've solved the world's problems economically and otherwise?
I'm just glad that we fixed everything.
We did. We even made them thinner.
I really do. Everything that we talked about, I think, comes back to personal choices and personal responsibility, and whether it's how you deal with the fact that your government is a drunken spending nut job, wasting your money. Whether it's, by the way, I wish they would quit calling spending when they spend money and they raise taxes. I wish they would quit calling raising taxes a saving. I wish they would call it what it is, which is increased spending and increased taxes. But all these things come down to personal decisions and personal choices. I do wish we lived in a country that was moving toward a trend of more personal choice and less state influence. But the fact remains that's not the trend. Even the Republican Party is moving more toward a world of the government tells you what to do, the government tells you how to do it. So I hate to sound like a fatalist, but we do live in a socialist country. I wish people quit pretending it's a free market. It's not. And on those few areas where we can have influence, unfortunately, we mostly only influence things through personal decisions and buying, which is a free market force.
Yeah, I think you got a point. I think, what is it, 1 in 8, or is it 1 in 8 are on food stamps? Brett, is that correct?
It's a huge.
It's shocking.
I think
it's shocking number.
50% of Americans are receiving more money than they're putting in. It's something to that effect. I don't know the breakdown of what particular welfare programs they're receiving, or even as benefits. I'm probably one of those Americans that are receiving more than I'm putting in. So, but I'm not on food stamps. So, my final thought is that I wouldn't say we're in a socialist country. I'd say we're a fascist country because the government tells us how to run our businesses and then let us die on our own. They don't help us out well, unless you're a big company like GM. They don't help you when you go out of business, but they certainly don't mind telling you how to run your business. But we get the government that reflects us, and if as individuals we're spending way too much money and we're eating too much fat, that's the kind of people we're going to elect to Washington D.C. and that's the kind of government policy we're going to get. And until we make personal decisions ourselves to start straightening up our lives and reflecting that at the ballot box and putting our leaders in those positions, we're going to get the government we deserve.
All right, I appreciate both of you guys coming on. Jason, do you have a G+.2 URL, or are you like 58 numbers still?
No, I'm Jason N. It's IMJASONN.
Okay. I am, what is it?
No, I am like I'm Jason N. JASONN. So my name is Jason Nunnelley. Nobody can spell Nunnelley. My whole life they misspelled it, so I just say I'm Jason N.
You'll get no sympathy from Bret Hrbek. You'll get no sympathy from Bret Hrbek on his name is just a lost cause. Every time we print his name in the paper, I think we get some variation of it wrong. They always put 2 T's on Bret. But okay. So Jason? Are you G+.2/ I am Jason?
I'm the contraction.
Okay.
I am JASONN. Just I'm Jason N. Well, yeah, make it easier for you. Just go to jasonn.com and you got a link at the top.
That didn't come through. Try it one more time. We're breaking up a little bit.
So you go to jasonn.com, JASONN.com, and at the top there's a link to all my social connections.
Okay. All right. Awesome. That makes it easy. JasonN.com. And Bret Hrbek is G+.to HRBEK. Jason G+.2/ HRBEK. And then I am G+.to McDermott. For audio listeners, McDermott. And links to virtually all the stores we discussed today are on my Plus page. Today's July 26th, so if you check then, however you want to do that. Okay, guys, thanks so much. I appreciate it. The McDermott Report airs every weeknight, although we may not do it Thursday night. I've got a fundraiser I've got to attend, but every weeknight at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time. We very much appreciate you checking us out. I always have stories posted and stuff that we're going to talk about on my Google Plus page. You're welcome to check that out as well. Big thank you to Jason and to Bret Hrbek, and that concludes tonight's McDermott Report. I will see you or hear you, hopefully, as you call tomorrow night. So thanks.